So this sort of shattering of lives has happened now for decades in most of Kashmir because of the way we have tried to look at a resolution of this problem. So I completely agree that lives have been shattered. There are many opinions. I have an opinion about how we can actually look towards reducing some of this tension which happens there. I genuinely believe, for example, that the police and the military action, at least in many parts of the valley, can be considerably reduced. Because very often, some of these actions create a lot more violence and troubles and emotions among the people, which perpetuates into a very bad cycle of going back. So one of the views is that definitely that sort of indulgence, the way the state looks at solving the problem can be reduced. But fundamentally, I'm just going back to the issue that we've perpetuated that there is a problem which can be solved. You know, it's a much larger dimension. I mean, I'm really trying to say that it's a much larger discussion about whether the Hurriyat represents the Kashmiris. For example, you have state elections which have happened, which are fairly honest and successful. So we have given too much importance to regional or separatist outfits which don't deserve the type of, they don't really represent a lot of Kashmiris. So I think that's another area that we should be looking at. You know, when you watch television in India, you think that these people really represent Kashmiris, and I've spoken to scores of Kashmiris that really have very little respect for these so-called separatist leaders who are supposedly representing them. But in Delhi, they seem to be very important. You know, so.
Thank you, Colonel Gopal Karnakaran. We shall now have Mr. Rakesh Mathur sharing his thoughts on what's happening in Kashmir.
Thank you, Jerry. Ladies and gentlemen, like all good corporates, I prepared a speech since I was asked to prepare a presentation. So I'm going to read out the presentation, but let me tell you, it comes straight from the heart. And I'm neither in politics, nor in governance, nor a student of Kashmir affairs. My business actually is tourism. And a few things that I say may be a little indiscreet, but I do believe in being frank. At the outset, I think I'm quite qualified to talk on Kashmir, even though I didn't know which panel I was to be on, because I've spent a lot of my impressionable years and some of the best years of my early professional career in Kashmir Valley. From 80 to 82, I was the general manager of the then, and perhaps even now, one of the best resort hotels in the country, which was then called the Oberoi Palace and is now called the Grand Lalit. I was a young boy of 28 years old then. Again, from 83 to 85, I went back as the general manager of the Centaur Hotel and Sher-e-Kashmir Convention Complex, which was owned by Air India. Now, in 1980, when I first went, they were great years for tourism. I just would like to mention that during that particular year that I reached, film shooting was at its peak, with about 8 to 10 film units staying with me every year, and lesser but significant units during the winter months. I mean, you can name the leading film stars of that time who came and stayed. And what happens when film shooting happens is, along with one unit, you have at least 40 to 50 people. There is a snowball effect. And along with film star come all the elite of the country, who want to spend time with them. So the atmosphere was vibrant with tourism. And the season began in April and it wound up in October. Even winter tourism was prevalent to a large extent, because there was a lot of winter film shooting also, and that was a major business. There was some foreign tourism also, but I think at that time, in 1980, 81 and 82, this contributed the maximum. People were gainfully employed, starting from craftsmen, weavers, all the shikarawalas, taxis, horse guides, and you name it. You know, I remember with vibrant parties on the lake in what is now called, they were called Dunga parties, these huge boats which were called Dungas, and everybody was happy. This continued till 1987. Trouble started in 1987, though I was not there at that time. I must mention that I've had a continuous linkage with Kashmir, both personal and professional, with all the leading players of that time, and to some extent with the current ones also. I have also been at several occasions an advisor on tourism to the state government. Later on, in 1985, I converted the Oberoi Palace into the Intercontinental Hotel, because at that time I was heading the Intercontinental chain for South Asia. And in my current assignment as President of Welcome Heritage, we are operating a chain of houseboats. Now, my views are as follows, purely from a tourism perspective. Kashmiris are a very proud, emotional and independent-minded people, proud of their unique heritage and descendants from Central Asia and perhaps Central and Eastern Europe. They were, now I am convinced about what I am saying, they were and they are Indians by loyalty, but Kashmiris by heart, and do want to assert that Kashmiriyat. Their hospitality is emotional, and so is their reaction to everything else. With family links across the line of control, there is an emotional bonding and desire to unify the larger Kashmir, irrespective of India and Pakistan. And therein lies the seed for their desire to be an independent state. At that time, the political manipulations did not help to bring about stability. Based on my little knowledge of, or whatever outside view that I have of politics, political power was wielded by a few, irrespective of different factions within those few people. I distinctly remember a reportedly disputed election result at that time, followed by a permanent curfew for about 8 months, and followed by governor's rule. I mean, the then chief minister was known as curfew chief minister. I think this was ridiculous in any democracy for any people of a state to be deprived of their right to be, to franchise. Another major problem was widespread corruption at all levels. Development funds were siphoned off, and it was rumored in all circles that merely 40% reached the ultimate goal. Thus, the common man, ladies and gentlemen, was certainly deprived. I may just add that several crores, even currently, have been sanctioned for dredging of the Dal Lake. Now, for anybody who's been to Kashmir, can certify the fact that there is very little dredging going on. And perhaps in our lifetime, that lake is going to become a swamp. Next, there was very little governance. Officers worked short hours at will, delaying files and making the poor man wait for any kind of decision making. The next factor which I consider very important is a certain disconnect of the valley with the rest of India, especially in the winter months, when roads got blocked and flights were not available to all. I personally believe that, here I'm referring to the previous panel, which was discussing, integration, topics like integration. I believe that a railway line should have been built linking Udhampur to the valley most immediately after partition. And I am aware that, incidentally, the owners of one of our hotels, his father was a chief engineer with the government at that time, and he showed me a project report they had prepared way back in 1930s, when a project to build a railway line was made at a princely sum of about 8 or 10 lakhs of rupees, but that project never saw the light of day. So I think, talking purely in terms of integration, something should have been done at that time to integrate the valley with the rest of the country. I remember a school trip of some Kashmiri children who came, and they were completely in awe of what they saw in Delhi. I think travel builds bridges and it brings about a lot of goodwill.